somebody brought it up earlier, but how important is it that Iowa's competitive in this game as it relates to their 12-team playoff chances? Because as Iowa State continues to win, and people are blowing Iowa State's success way out of proportion. They haven't played anybody yet. I mean, people literally last night, this success for Iowa State is great. They have not done anything yet. Houston's horrible. Okay, they're horrible. So they went down and beat a horrible Houston team. Congratulations. Now, they're ranked relatively high right now in the polls. My point being, assuming Iowa State can prove that they are a good football team and a competitor for the 12-team playoff, if that's one of Iowa's two losses, a close loss to Iowa State in September, we talked about this preseason, and maybe it comes to fruition, and then a close loss to Ohio State, I think they're in contention, solid contention at that point if Iowa runs the table. But how important is it that Iowa keeps this game relatively competitive, and what would that look like to you, even in a loss?
So who was the second best team that Iowa was going to play in the Big Ten? Who would that be?
Nebraska?
Exactly.
Right now?
So
I mean,
they're playing, unless something drastically changes, they're playing one of the three best teams in the country this Saturday. Then the next best game in the Big Ten is against the 30th best team in the country. So I think this is very important for Iowa to show. I think the committee has always looked at it as, we want to make sure that we're selecting teams that belong, quote, belong, like are not going to get embarrassed and have not given us indicators that they're going to get embarrassed.
I mean, could Michigan State end up being there? I mean, we projected preseason, but we didn't know exactly what the Big Ten would look like. And now we're starting to see it as we've got a couple of these teams having already played 2 conference games and another Power 4 opponent. But yeah, like Washington, they beat Northwestern, but they've not looked good by any means. Michigan State had flashes against Ohio State. They still lost by 31. Wisconsin, we haven't seen anything that's been convincing that Luke Fickell's turned the corner in year 2. UCLA's looked horrible at times. Maryland's 0-2 in the conference. It's as favorable, and we didn't mention Northwestern. They're horrible. It's as favorable of a schedule as one could imagine, Mark, this new Big Ten.
Except for this week, it is.
Except for this week. Now, honestly, Mark, is it possible that we go back at the end of this year and look back at the Minnesota game and say that was one of Iowa's 3 best Big Ten wins? Because they won it on the road
against Michigan.
Maybe. Yeah, the way they played against Michigan second half. We'll see what Minnesota does, but the fact they won that game on the road, each of these games is still really important. You almost wish they had an Illinois or an Indiana on the schedule. But the bottom line is I still think the committee will have to make some decisions. If Iowa's competitive in this game with how they lost to Iowa State, but here's the bottom line. If they do this, I don't even know why we're talking about it, even though I'm the one who brought it up. Because if they do that, if they go 10-2, Mark, that will mean that they were 8-1 in the conference. I think they're likely in the Big Ten title game at that point. Yeah. So it won't matter because they're going to have a chance to either lose again or beat a really good team in Indy. And I think if they lose again, regardless who it is, the committee's going to look at that point, Mark, and say Iowa played 3 really good teams in 2024. They lost to all of them. Does that sound familiar? Like 2023? That's what the committee's going to do if that happens. Even if Iowa State keeps winning, they lost to 3 really good teams on their way to a 10-3 record. They're out. If they go to the Big Ten championship game and beat an Ohio State or an Oregon or a whoever, Penn State, all of a sudden you're looking at this and saying, okay, they went 11-2, Big Ten title, win against Penn State, and 2 tight losses. They're in. So I don't really know that it will matter because I think if they go 10-2, it will all get sorted out in Indy. That's my bold take here on October 1st.
I think you're correct. I think that the only thing that keeps them out of Indy is some kind of strange, crazy tiebreaker, because that's possible. Because now that we've got all these teams, USC doesn't play Iowa or Ohio State or Oregon. USC's looking at a situation where they're playing Penn State in 2 weeks. That's going to be their season as it pertains to the Big Ten. If they win that game against Penn State, then look out. They're probably going to finish 8-1. And Penn State's in a similar situation where they may finish 8-1. You could have all sorts of strange, like three-way tie at 8-1, or a four-way tie for first place. Four
And so
8-1 teams.
If you're Iowa and you're already looking ahead at the Big Ten championship, you're probably hoping. I guess you're probably rooting for. Who are you rooting for in that Penn State USC game? That's in what'd you say, a week? So who's? I don't know who
You're
you root for
rooting
in
for
that one.
Penn State.
Why though? Because
They've got a tougher schedule. They've got to play Ohio State. I
yeah,
don't
but
think they
that
play
still puts them
Oregon,
at
do they?
just one loss. They don't play anybody else. They play Maryland, Minnesota,
Okay.
Washington, Purdue, and Wisconsin. You'd have to hope Penn
Yeah.
State loses to a Wisconsin. That's what I'm saying. Like you might be right. They may end up with 3 or more teams with one loss.
Think about this. Between Iowa, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Penn State, did I just name 5 teams? Yes, 5 teams. Let's say 4 of them. 4 of them could go 8-1 because they just don't play each other. Now we know other teams are going to jump up and pull off upsets. But yeah, some of the
That's
scenarios that I feared and played out when this conference got too big, in terms of having legitimate tiebreakers to decide which team should be in Indy when they're just not going to be there.
so all those things are possibilities, but I think it also is still fair to say it's most likely that if Iowa goes 10-2, they're in the Big Ten championship game.
Most likely, yes.
Because I think it's still more likely that either they win in a tiebreaker scenario, or if there's not a tiebreaker scenario, they have to win. You get what I'm saying? Like,
And then Iowa wants Ohio State just to clean the deck, beat
yes,
Penn State,
right,
beat Oregon, just be undefeated,
and then play them again in
yeah.
Indy. And Mark, there's a couple super chats that if you want to hit these before we
Absolutely
sign off. And for people that don't know, you and I are going to be chatting again tomorrow during your Ohio State show. I'm going to hop on with you guys for a little while tomorrow morning so people have time.
Yes. So the Buckeyes live shows at 11 a.m. Eastern, at 10 Central, and we get Corey for a few minutes. So be looking out for that. Mike 3883, thank you so much for the super chat. Go Buckeyes. Brian wasn't the problem. Kirk is. Okay. Well, Mike, we enjoy you being here. You know that.
Yep.
Somebody did mention to Kirk during the news conference today that he has never won in Columbus. But they also mentioned, it was funny because his response was perfect. The reporter said something like, "Well, is that something you would like to accomplish?" Like, oh, yeah. And he's like, "Well, not for me personally, but that means, that we could win Saturday. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
kind
thought
of
you were
why
going
we're
to.
doing this." That's
Another good response would probably have been, I'm sure almost every current Big Ten head coach is there any current Big Ten head coach that has won in Columbus? Think about that. Think about that. Ryan Day, or excuse me, not Ryan Day. Who did I just have in my mind?
no, because Jim
Luke Fickell.
Harbaugh and Mark D'Antonio are the last two. They're the only two that have won in the last 13 years.
Luke Fickell never took his Cincinnati team in there.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
And didn't win. He lost 42-zip in 2019.
Cincinnati came to Columbus and lost 42-0?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Doug, Hawkeye in Ames. Hi, Corey. How many Big 12 and how many Big 10 teams make the college football playoff?
Oh, okay. Well, I saw the latest news. I'm sure you've covered that the Big Ten and the SEC are looking for 4 automatic bids moving forward, but I still think there's a chance that the Big Ten gets 4 in this year, and I think there's a chance that the SEC gets 4 in this year. That would leave. You obviously have the G5, right? The G5 AQ, so to speak, the highest ranked G5 program that gets in, and then that would leave the ACC, the Big 12, and then a couple at-large teams. Am I correct? How many are we at?
You're going 4 Big
4,
Ten, 4
8,
SEC. That's 8. 1 for the
8.
Big 12, 1 for the ACC is 10. The G5 makes 11. So
So,
either a Notre Dame or another one for the ACC or the Big 12.
so yeah, one other at large. Or is it? Do you think there's any possibility that I'm guessing you'll say no, but is there any possibility if you have two, like a James Madison and a UNLV, that they could get two G5 teams in?
What do you think I'm going to
I know
say?
you're going to say no, but I mean,
No,
those two,
no
both
way in
those
hell.
teams have looked really good.
No,
But they
no
both look. Can you just
way.
admit they both looked really good so
No
far?
way.
Okay, all right. They haven't looked good.
They
Never
could
mind. You
expand the
suck.
playoff to 24 teams, and they're not getting a second team in.
And that's too bad to an extent. That's
To
unfortunate.
an All right. Lemansky says, Mark, regarding Chip, best money can buy versus development program in Iowa. Ooh, Lemansky, what's going on here? The Dallas Cowboys of the Big Ten special teams wins it for the Hawks. Oh, see, sometimes I've heard this out of usually Michigan fans that Ohio State is the Dallas Cowboys of the Big Ten, but the Dallas Cowboys don't win championships. So I don't really understand I
You know
understand the
what?
glitz and the money or whatever you want to, the resources, but I don't get the conversion into the wins.
But you know what? That analogy, that is such a carryover from the 20th century Cowboys teams, because Don Patterson used to talk about that when he would recruit kids up here. He used to tell Texas kids, "Hey, we're the Dallas Cowboys of Iowa," right? Because there's no pro sports team
Oh,
in
okay.
Iowa, so this is Iowa's team, and it worked, right? That's so. I don't know if there's a little bit of that in Lemansky's comments here.
But he's
Um,
saying that about Ohio State, isn't he?
he may be. Yeah, I read that the same
Okay.
way.
I don't really get that.
So, I guess final thing, Mark, we didn't talk anything about special teams, and I think that's a little unfair of us because Drew Stevens has been really good. He's 6 of 6, and he's made some long kicks so far. He's perfect on PATs, and Reese Dakin's coming off his best performance. And speaking of punters, man, Torrey Taylor, what he did for the Bears, I don't know if you've seen some of that, but he was phenomenal on Sunday for the Bears. Basically, single handedly put them. They showed I've seen this going viral this week on social media after that game. Every time he punted, the Bears' chances of winning went like this. Like every time he punted, it was like climbing a ladder, and they managed to win. He was just a masterpiece. I mean,
Kirk was
60-yard
smiling
punts.
somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. So you wonder, I mean, how much of I would think you give, that's the one position we didn't run through. I'd probably, without even knowing what Ohio State has, I'd
Iowa.
probably give Iowa the not on special teams. And
Ohio
maybe
State's
that,
fine, but it's Iowa.
yeah, so there you go. I guess if you look at it from that perspective, 5-4, maybe it's not as lopsided. And I will say this: people want to talk about Ohio State and how much better they are at receiver than Iowa, and obviously the Iowa receivers aren't going up against the Ohio State receivers. But for the sake of this discussion, yes, Ohio State's receivers are exponentially better than Iowa's. But I would venture to say, based on what you've said and what Pat said earlier and what I know about Iowa, Iowa's linebackers might be exponentially better than Ohio State's. You have two
Um,
All-Americans.
in production, yeah.
I mean, they're still really talented.
Yeah, they're
And
talented guys. They're both 5 stars,
so they're
but no, they're
probably
not
both,
playing well.
if you say that Iowa's linebackers and Ohio State's receivers cancel each other out, you're probably right. Ohio State's linebackers are probably more talented than Iowa's receivers. But, again, we've seen a difference. We've seen a difference through 1 month. And I've been predicting since August that we're going to see a jump with Iowa's pass game and production in the passing game. Now, maybe it won't happen this week because they're going up against a really good opponent and really good defense. But I do think the bye week will serve them well, and maybe a stepping stone to running the table after this week, regardless of result.
You don't buy into the betting numbers. I'm not a big betting guy, but I am intrigued by the numbers. I don't lay money on games, but I do enjoy all of that. And I still remember your response. And this, I am not in any way criticizing you, but I remember your response, and it's well justified. And I understand what your response was. The off season prior to the last time they played in Columbus, this was like 3 or 4 months before the season started. And I said, Ohio State's going to be like a 25-point favorite in that game. And you were like, flap. And I understand why. It sounds ridiculous. And they ended up being a 30-point favorite, and they won by 44. This week they started a 24-point favorite. I think it's down to 19 or something.
Yeah, I saw 20.5 at last
20
check,
and
but
I
yeah.
saw 20 and a half. That's what I posted actually on a banner that I didn't use. But anyway, um, I saw some 19s out there. Now, our betting guy, Steve Merrill from Wager Talk, would say that actually the public usually moves the line the wrong way. They don't know what they're doing. That's what he says usually happens. I think I would still favor Iowa, even with that point reduction at this point.
Yeah, I'm by no means going out on a limb and predicting Iowa. I'll give my prediction here later in the week, but I feel better than I did preseason. Even though I know Ohio State could explode Saturday and beat any team by double digits, but I have cautiously optimistic based on what I've seen. I don't feel like Ohio State has been quite as dominant in certain areas as I expected them to be, and so that makes me more positive based on
Yeah.
preseason expectations.
That's perfectly fair. And again, just to cut it straight on Will Howard, your evaluation on the running situation, I do not disagree with that. He's nowhere close to the athlete that those other guys are, but he's a willing runner and capable. Let's put him in that category.